Do you ever question what it means to be more masculine or more feminine in your energy? Have you ever thought about how tapping in to one or the other can allow you to grow and succeed deeper in your business as well as your personal relationships? So that's what we are talking about today. We are talking about understanding the healthy essence of your feminine and masculine essence and sexual energy, and how you can use that to unlock opportunities and grow stronger in your own intuition, your own purpose, and your own success. I'm Clara Capano, and this is Women Winning Their Way. Well, welcome, Jaitara. It is so exciting to have you here today with us.
Thank you, Clara. Wonderful to be here. Thank you for
You know,
sharing
you
me
and
with your
I,
tribe.
yes, you and I were connected by a mutual friend. And, let me make sure I get this title right because I think this is pretty fantastic. You are the sage of sexual healing and enlightenment, especially for women.
Yes.
That just sounds amazing. And one of the reasons I really wanted to have you on the show is this idea of femininity and especially, female sexuality. I think when we talk about the show, even the title, Women
Mhm.
Winning Their Way, I
Yes.
think so many of us women, don't understand how we can embrace our femininity and our sexuality as a position of strength. I think society as a whole
Mhm.
has created this sort of story that women and femininity is weak. Women are emotional.
Mhm.
We can't possibly be good leaders because we're just going to break in and start crying at any point in time. And I think that that has caused many of us to hold back. I also feel that in the 80s, we sort of went to the other spectrum where it was embrace the masculinity and crush people because we
Mhm.
were trying to fight for a seat at the table. So I think many of us are just super confused as to what this even means. So I would love to have you talk a little bit.
Sure.
Why is it so important for women if we are going to create a path to success and do it on our terms?
Mhm.
Why is understanding and tapping into our femininity and not being ashamed of our sexuality so important to us?
Thank you for that. Yeah, and I like to refer to it as our feminine power. I mean, if you look at I'm sure you've heard the expression divine masculine, divine feminine.
Yes.
Another term for that is healthy masculine, healthy feminine.
Hmm.
So the simplest definition of the divine feminine is nurturing, compassion, intuition, love. The simplest definition of divine masculine is providing safety, witnessing without judgment, and holding that space. So, as men and women, we both have a degree of both the feminine and masculine essence within us. Now,
Hmm.
I am primarily feminine essence, but it's important. A big aha for me was years ago when I was on my healing journey and I connected with my own inner divine masculine because I was holding myself in self judgment, and he would never do that. He would never judge. So I had to come into alignment with that. Once I did that, I felt safer in my body. So, being feminine. So I just want to tweak that language a bit because being feminine is, we think of that as more like flowy dresses and the way that we dress and the
Hmm.
external. So being in your feminine power, that's a whole different thing. You could be wearing a cover of overalls and cleaning up poop in the farmyard and be very powerful in your feminine power. So a woman who's in her feminine power, there is strength in that gentleness. There is strength and power in her love. And if you think of the lioness, she's tender and loving toward her cubs, but don't you dare cross her because
Right.
the feminine is also very fierce. And as women, I know for myself, sometimes we have to shift into more the masculine energy and how that shows up in the workplace. That's the energy of making decisions, getting the job done, being in control, creating that structure. Um, I love to also compare the difference between masculine and feminine meditation. In the morning, I choose a more masculine where it's structured. I'm just sitting still and I'm holding that stillness and I'm just tuning into all my senses, listening to the birds and the trees. Whereas feminine meditation is movement and dance. Like if you
Mm.
think of the ocean, the
Yeah,
rocks and the shore would be the masculine, that structure holding that container, and the waves dancing and moving, that's more of the feminine. So they work together in harmony with one another.
yeah,
When it comes to relationships, if you're running a business, we have to tap into that masculine. We have to get the job done, maintain the structure, be in control, make decisions. But when you take the boardroom into the bedroom, that's when you start running into problems because now the polarity is out of whack.
right. Yeah, that's a really good point.
You know?
So, I tend to feel that I am more masculine energy. And you were
Mhm.
talking that you tend to be more feminine.
Yes.
So, in business, as a leader or as a female entrepreneur, if we have more masculine energy, how can we tap in to our feminine energy and vice versa? If we're more feminine, how can we tap into the masculine?
Okay. Well, first of all, you don't want to tap into one that is not natural for you.
Okay.
There's nothing wrong with being in a woman's body and being naturally more masculine essence. If that's the truth of who you are, then embrace that. So you want to be, but if you're feeling exhausted, there's a chance you might be pushing too hard in the other direction. That you're
Oh, maybe
pushing.
we think like maybe I think, and this was maybe in the 80s what I was talking about, where women felt they had to be more masculine. And that's where they started getting themselves burned out because they weren't in alignment. So again,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
really
there's a
listen.
lot of women, they work in corporate, for example, for a long time. It's very masculine driven, and then they get
Yeah.
exhausted because, when you look at the workplace, when you think of it in terms of the workplace, it's all about competition. It's in the language, like even the marketing language,
Mhm.
shoot your competition, beat your competition, shoot for your target market. It's all very hunt and kill type language, which
Yeah.
is the masculine. They get invigorated by that. So if you're
Mhm.
primarily masculine language, that will exhilarate you to tune into it like that. For the feminine, what works for us in business, we're collaboration. We're about co-creation, and
Mhm.
that's where we get our juices going. So the old style marketing is really not working out there. I'm in the field of coaching. There's a ton of spiritual mentors, coaches out there that are, and a lot of them are women, and that type of marketing language just does not work with women.
Absolutely.
They're just not resonating. It's about collaborating and attraction and drawing to you. Yeah, it's a whole different language.
Wow, that's so I just had like a major aha moment, when you brought that into the marketing, because I think so many people, again, even though as more the feminine energy, we still want to grow. We still want to grow our profits and drive our teams.
Yes.
But again, if I want to work with other more female energy organizations, I have to use that kind of language. If I want to work with more of a male energy corporation, then I want to use that because, again, it's in the languaging that we use. And I think you're absolutely right. It's not going to feel right unless you are in alignment with yourself. So
Yeah.
I appreciate that. That was a really good moment. So
Yeah, and I've learned to embrace marketing. I used to have a lot of resistance, and then I realized if you think of it as sharing, it takes on a different feeling. But if I went out there and marketed myself to potential clients in the masculine way, I wouldn't get any clients. It would
yeah,
feel, again, it's that
right.
hunt and
And I
kill
think it's
type.
fair to say that there are some men who have more female energy, and there's some great,
Absolutely.
amazing leaders who are male, but they are more about collaboration. I can think of someone even like a Simon Sinek, listening to now the way that he talks about more collaboration, more team, more
Hmm.
nurturing and growing your team. That has more feminine
It
energy,
does.
even
Yes.
though he is masculine. So that's really interesting. So I appreciate you bringing that in. And I think, for the people that are viewing this is understanding again, there is no right or wrong. Get
No.
clear on who you are, get clear on who you really want to work with and
Hmm.
and show up because again, there'll be that connection. And I loved the analogy you used of the ocean. That for the ocean to be beautiful, we need both. We need the rocks, we need the
Yeah.
structure, and we need the flowing of doing that. So, you kind of mentioned that you were on a healing journey that brought you to this. I would love to learn more because I think that there probably are some, people that are watching this and following this who are kind of in that dance too of thinking that they've been holding back again, not really knowing this. How did
Mm.
you find the beauty in tapping into your feminine energy and sexuality and being able to embrace all of that?
Thank you. Well, I've always thought of myself as very sexual. I even have memories when I was quite young before I was sexually activated where I just thought of myself as sexy before I even knew what that meant. Um, for me, it was a healing journey that started in 1999 when I was a young teen. I was exploited and manipulated. And the breaking point for me, I remember it like yesterday. It was in 1999. It was November. I was living in Toronto and I was standing in a subway station. And across from me, across the platform, was this big billboard. And these billboards were only up around the city for a couple of months. They were sponsored by the police department. And it said, teenage prostitution is child abuse. And I was that child. And it
Mhm.
hadn't occurred to me till that moment, 27 years after the fact, that I'd even been a victim. And I
Wow.
went into a state of shock. I don't even remember the trip home. I remember standing in my bathroom, looking out my bathroom window, and 27 years of suppressed rage,
Mm.
anger, grief just erupted all at once. It felt unbearable. And I cried out the words, God, please help me.
Mhm.
And spirit speaks to me through animals because they know I'm going to go look it up. And in that moment, a bird landed on my back patio railing. I hadn't seen one like it before, and I instantly became peaceful. And it was just there long enough to get a good look. And then I looked up and found what kind of bird it was. And it was a grackle. The teaching of a grackle is to release emotional congestion from the past before it manifests into physical illness so we can move forward into the future. To me, that was a powerful message. So
Right.
I just stayed home for 2 days and just purged. I just gave
Mhm.
myself permission to just cry, scream, get it all out. Now, if I'd known about the healing work I now do, I could have done it in a few hours, but that was my
Sure.
journey. And at the end of those 2 days, it was like a veil lifted.
Mm.
For 27 years, I carried that self judgment, that self blame, that shame. It was my secret that I kept inside. After that, I literally got on the phone 2 days later and called all my friends and said, guess what happened to me as a teenager? And I didn't. And then that was the beginning of my healing journey. There was still a few more years. I discovered breath work, which I'm now a facilitator of, and different modalities. And the more I stepped into my power and reclaimed myself and freed myself from that, the more I felt inspired to help other women on this path. I didn't plan this career. I was happy being an actor and an artist, but
Mhm.
it's just sort of evolved into me doing this now. Because what happens, sexual energy, it creates our very human existence. Before we come into these bodies, depending on your belief system, my
Mhm.
belief is we're pure, divine, love intelligence. Someone has sex, and now we are pure, divine, love intelligence growing inside human form. So, sexuality is literally the power cord that connects the two realms, if you think
Mhm.
of it like that. So, even if we were conceived without love, that's irrelevant. The divine design of us is that our light body, who we are as spiritual beings, is intended to be merged with who we are as physical beings. We're not just flesh and bones, we are spirit,
Right.
emotions, everything. So the sexual energy is the very root of what created our human existence. So, just like the roots of a tree, if there's constriction there, it can never fully blossom to its full potential. So if there's constriction and wounding at the root of the very energy that created you, there's always a part of you holding back to protect this vulnerable aspect of yourself.
Mhm.
When you're holding back at the roots, it filters into every area of your life. It can show up in your voice, the power of your voice. I've seen women sometimes where their shoulders are rounded, they're protecting their heart space. There's some protection happening there.
Right.
It's just walking around with your shoulders back and your heart exposed. So when you're holding back everywhere. So it filters into everything, what you're creating in your life. I have a new body work I created called Pleasure and Prosperity, where it speaks about the spiritual connection of our pleasure and our prosperity. Because again, if you're holding back, you're holding back. It shows up in your voice, what you're creating in the world. What you're creating in the world creates your prosperity. So it impacts everything, how you show up in intimacy, how you show up for yourself, how you show up for relationships. When you feel really safe and grounded and open and free in your body with nothing needing to be protected, it impacts everything.
Yeah. So I don't know. Can you give us maybe some examples? Because when I think, again, what society has told us, sexuality in the workplace, I'm showing up in a low cut blouse with a really, high skirt and I'm showing off all the girls and everything like that. But I don't think that's sexuality. And I don't think that's what you're talking about when you're saying,
No.
okay, to tap into and leverage your sexuality because it opens you up. So maybe explain a little bit about what we can
Sure.
do about what it means to be sexual as far as tapping into our sexual essence in the workplace.
Yeah, it's a big, yeah, sort of what you described. I mean, if I were to show up in an office dressed in a really low cut, trying to, intentionally doing that,
Mhm.
for me, at the root of that, I would sense that there's some kind of insecurity, and there's an overcompensation happening, looking for attention in an environment where it's not appropriate. It's different if you're, going out on a sexy date in a bar and you want to turn on your date. So
Mhm.
there's, it's not appropriate in a particular workplace. So there's looking for a particular type of attention that doesn't fit in that environment. There's nothing wrong with a really sexy dress. It
Right.
just,
Needs
it's
to be appropriate time.
need
Yeah.
to be appropriate for the environment that you're in at the time. So if I was going to see that, my first thought would be, oh, there's a wound at the root of that, and they're needing some kind of attention
Mhm.
because of whatever that wound is at the root of that. So when it's healthy sexuality, again, it's you feel anchored, you feel grounded, you feel confident. You don't feel a need to, what's the word I'm looking for? You don't feel a need to try too hard.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know why this is coming to me right now. I'm thinking of the movie Avatar. When
Mm.
you think of the aliens in Avatar, they were extremely sexy, like very sexy, but it wasn't leaking a
Mhm.
trying too hard. There was a confidence and a
Yeah.
power and it anchored and connected to the earth, but yet extremely sexy. I don't know why that came in as an
Well,
analogy.
no, but I
Someone
think that
pointed
there's
that out to
something
me
in that.
years ago.
What I'm envisioning is that again, some of the times that I see women and I'm, like, oh, she's got it. It's because again, she's not looking for that validation. She knows who
Mhm.
she is. And again, that
Exactly.
confidence can be very sexy.
Yes.
Again, feeling, that she's owning it. So like as a speaker, owning the stage that I'm on and knowing that, I belong there. It's not necessarily about what I'm wearing. It's the
Mhm.
essence that's inside of me that is
Yeah.
speaking.
Exactly. Yeah, and when you have that groundedness, when you feel confident in your body, when you feel safe in your own body, when you feel powerful in your own body, it doesn't matter what you're wearing, you can be extremely sexy because it's the essence of who you are that
Yeah.
is that.
So how do we get that? As women, how do we get that? If we're
Well,
struggling
it
with it, like
starts with the healing. Yeah, it is. You got to clear out the
we can't
cobwebs.
just go to CVS and buy it in a bottle. It doesn't have that on the shelf there.
Like I say to people, all the teachings and the mentorship, there's so many coaches out there teaching about sacred sexuality, all of that, which is beautiful. But all the mentorship in the world can only go so far if you've got these cobwebs in your basement. You
Mhm.
got to clean out the cobwebs. You got to do
Yeah.
the healing. You have to make peace with the past. That's, the foundation of the work I do. And the only way to do that is get to the very, very root source. I have a very special technique in the healing work I do where we trace it back to where the wound very first began. And sometimes that might be 2 years old.
Mm.
Sometimes we end up back in the womb and you
Yeah.
have to pour all that acknowledgement, love, and compassion on that wounded part right at the very root where it all began. And until that part is healed, it's everything else. You're never going to cure it. You're just putting on a band aid addressing the symptoms.
Mhm.
You have to go back to the root. So
Yeah.
if you were assaulted as a 3-year old, as a 5-year old, if you were treated inappropriately, if you were shamed through religion, whatever it is, if you were shamed through touching yourself, you have to go back. And there's a specific process I do where we um, heal that child back when that happened, that aspect of you
Yeah.
that where the wound was first imprinted on you. Because once that imprint happens, until it's healed back then, it's going to keep showing up. For example, if you have a betrayal wound, if you were betrayed as a child and that's never addressed throughout your life, you're going to run into situations where you're going to keep getting that betrayal. It's like a knee jerk, it'll keep showing up
Mhm.
and it won't be cleared until you go back to the root source where it began. So that's what I do. And when it comes to sexuality, even if celibacy is your choice, you want to make that choice from a place of peacefulness and
Mhm.
contentment versus fear
Yeah.
and protection and due to wounding.
Yeah.
So,
Now, I think there's a lot of people out there that may not even know they're wounded. They may not because maybe they're not willing, or not aware. You mentioned earlier, when I asked you about the difference between, again, the male and the female, and you mentioned, if you're always exhausted, you might be not in your right essence. Are there
Mhm.
any other signs that maybe people can pay attention to get them to start thinking, maybe I do need to address this?
Yeah, I mean, I do have some people where they don't have any memory of any kind of abuse
Mhm.
or something specific, but they know something's not quite right
Mhm.
just because of the way that they're showing up. They know that they're holding back. For some, it could be ancestral.
Mm.
Sometimes I do healing journeys where we end up all the way back in the womb, and it was actually their mother's imprint that got imprinted on them because you're inside her body. So you're very sensitive to her energy. Usually, people can sense something's not. They're lacking confidence in the bedroom. They're just lacking confidence when it comes to communicating around intimacy, period. They just don't feel fully in their power. And there's so many, I've seen this show up a lot where I've read about it, talked to women where they feel strong and powerful in the boardroom, but when it comes to intimacy, they don't quite know how
Mm.
to show up and speak in their power about that.
Mm.
Um, yeah, so if you feel confident, at peace, and strong in every element, then you're probably okay. If there's a discomfort that keeps showing up for you, or things not quite clicking the way they should, then there's probably something there.
Mhm.
And we can
Yeah.
explore that and get to the root of it and find what that is and clear it. Because, we're all powerful beings, all of us.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would love to get your take on, as women, and you kind of, gave this idea of don't bring the boardroom into the bedroom, you know, and I've experienced this, and I know a lot of my female friends have, because again, birds of a feather flock together. So I tend to connect with
Hmm.
other strong, women that are out there. And I hear this all the time, and I've experienced this where men are attracted to me for my essence. They love the strength, they love the confidence. But then we start dating and they're like, "Ooh, don't like this anymore." So it's like, again, how do we, because I'm like, when people would be like, "Oh, well, when you're dating, tap into the feminine energy." And I'm like, "So what? Am I supposed to give him a jar of pickles and be like, 'Oh, will you open this for me so you feel like a man again?'" How do how do we reconcile this? Because I am who I am.
Yes.
And again, I want to be truthful and authentic. But then on the relationship side, it works great in the business side. But on the
Hmm.
relationship side, I sort of feel like I'm scaring men off.
Okay, that's a good question. Because first of all, I know powerful women. Many sometimes think men are intimidated by powerful men are not intimidated by powerful men. It's actually women. It's actually a turn on for them. When it comes to intimacy, though, they also want to be the king, and it doesn't mean you suddenly pretend you can't open the pickle jar.
I can open a pickle jar.
But if you're used to delegating, giving instructions, you want to be careful you don't take that into the dating. So it's, how can you surrender? I know you can open the door for yourself, but what if they want to open the door for you? Just step back, let them do that. It's not that they don't think you can open your own door. It's their way of honoring you and showing respect, and give them the space to do that.
Mhm.
How else can it show up? One of the expressions, and this is doesn't apply to everyone that I share with women. Nurture as, it comes to nurturing, nurture as the lover, not the mother. So
Ah,
women who are naturally very nurturing, they can take that nurturing energy into a relationship, and the man will receive it because at first it feels really good, but subconsciously, if it's coming from a mothering place, it'll kill
mhm.
the intimacy.
Yeah,
You don't want to have sex with your mother.
yeah,
So if you're very naturally nurturing, keep it sexy, keep it sensual, nurture as the lover, not the mother.
yeah.
On dating, yeah, if you're having a conversation, just being present for one another.
Mhm.
I mean, we don't want to go on a date with a man who just, talks about his work the whole time. So keep the work out of
Mm.
it. It's lovely to love what you do. You can, if they ask, you can talk about your work a bit, but try to keep a balance there so it doesn't turn into a work meeting versus, you know, looking into the eyes of this person who's sitting across from you saying, what is your soul's desire? What
Right.
fires you up? What makes you passionate? Try to steer the conversation in that direction. Because I've fallen into that true trap. I love my work, and I
Mm.
can go off on a tangent talking about my work and this and that, but it's they'll start to lose interest when it's in a
Right.
dating situation because now you're not present with them anymore. You're present with your work.
Mhm.
So you want to
But I
be.
also think tapping into something that you said is it's not about necessarily diminishing who we are, but it's
Mm-mm-mm.
also allowing them to be who they are and acknowledging them. And I had a situation with a boyfriend of mine when we went on a trip together, and he went to go grab my luggage, being very nice. He was going to take my luggage. And I was like, I can carry my own bag, please. Yes, because to me it was like, oh, he's trying to control me. And he's like, I'm just trying to be nice, just
Yeah,
trying.
it's a sign.
And
Well,
it's
yeah,
like,
when the
oh.
masculine does that, it's a sign of respect
So I
because
let him
that's what
I
we.
let him
Oh,
carry my
they,
bag from that
yeah,
point
we can
forward.
get defensive. Yeah, yeah, and it's like, no, no, he's
So
just showing his that's his way of showing his
exactly. And
respect.
and again, allowing that. And again, it doesn't even mean if we're in a male female, it could be a female female, male male relationship again because we do those. So this has
Mhm,
just been a fantastic conversation. I really love what you've done. You've really given me some things to think about, and I can see how, knowing who we are again will allow us to not only honor ourselves better but also
mhm,
learn to honor others, and that's a really powerful thing because of again
mhm,
we're going to be women winning on our terms and finding success our way. We have to be able to tap into who we are, but a big part of it also is acknowledging others. So thank you. And I know we're going to have all of your information
mhm.
in our show notes. So if people want to find you, get your books, work with you, they'll be able to do that. To bring it all to a close, I would love to ask you one final question. Sitting where you are today, learning everything that you've learned, how do you define success for yourself now?
I like that question. Success for me is I'm doing work I love that fills my soul.
Mhm.
So it's fulfilling for me on all multidimensional, not just because there's money coming into the bank account, but because it just fills my soul, it fills my heart, it fulfills me emotionally and spiritually. And so for me, that's a definition of, I refer to that as sacred pleasure and prosperity. I take great pleasure in the work that I do. It fulfills me on every level. And then the prosperity is a natural evolution of that coming from that place. To me, that's success.
Ah, I love it. Well, thank you so much for spending time with me today.
Thank you.
I really just appreciate the love and light that you brought to all of us, and just
Thank
honored to be
you.
able to have you as a guest. So
Thank
thank
you
you.
so much, Clara.
All right, everyone. Wow. What a great talk. I took away so much, and she really again got me thinking about some things. I think many times we struggle with the dance of am I being too masculine and am I being too feminine, and that can cause a lot of stress and again cause us to burn out. So again, really tapping into what is your true essence and understanding there is no right or wrong. There is nothing wrong with you if you're more one or the other. So again, using those things. And again, both sides, the feminine side has more of the collaboration, the nurturing. The masculine side has more of, that going forward, that strategy. And again, I love how she brought that analogy of the ocean where we need the structure and we need the flow. That's something that I talk about in working on some engagements of the hustle and the flow, and finding the harmony between those. I loved the idea of, a lot of feeling our sexuality and having that healthy sexuality is again knowing who we are, giving ourselves that grounding nature, and really bringing in that essence, and that when you go out into the world, own your essence, own who you are, because that's what's going to be able to connect you. Really strategical thing she talked about is the idea of how are you using your language, and knowing from your perspective when you're going out there and working to connect with your ideal client, talk in the language. So if you are more feminine, you're probably going to attract more feminine, businesses and people to work with. So use that kind of language and vice versa. And then towards the end of it, what does success mean for you? Well, loving what you do, living in your passion, and finding something that just lights you up inside. So I hope you found value. I know that so many of us have questions around this. So keep following, share this episode because I know that we can continue to spread more positivity. And she mentioned the idea of the lioness. Well, remember, I have the Lioness League. That's my membership where we can all join and be able to collaborate and still be fierce. So thank you so much. Keep following Women Winning Their Way. I'm your host, Clara Capano, and we will see you next time.